integration things we can do here. Basically, to sort of bring these two images together a bit more, we can do a bit of diffusion, and we can do some flaring and some glows. So all the little tweaks at the end of a comp that you would do. Something else I've done is I just kind of tweaked. I took a little bit of green out of the plate in general. So if I was looking really close at this, it just feels a little bit too green. And if you're not as sensitive to colors yet and you need to train your eye a little bit more, one way you can kind of test this is to put a saturation node. I think I probably showed this in other videos as well, but if you take saturation node and you crank it up and you put it at a very high number like this, you can see, maybe it's just a little bit too green here compared to over here. I mean, it might be okay with this building, but it just felt a little bit better to put a very slight grade to take a little bit of green out. So you can see if you compare to here, here's before and there's after. So it just feels a little bit closer together. And those little tiny changes will definitely help with final integration. So a couple other things I did that we can talk about is, so here's our flare that we added. I've also brought down his face a little bit because it was starting to feel a little too contrasty with the highlight adjustments that we were doing. So I kind of brought that down just a tad, and then, we don't want to push it too far to feel overly processed. This feels a tiny bit processed, but I think it's okay because it kind of tells a story a little bit. But one thing we can do is diffusion. So diffusion is sort of just basically, if you think of a lens and you put a little bit of a smudge on the lens, it kind of blurs the light together a little bit. So a really easy way to create that look and sort of blend colors together is just to blur your image a whole bunch. So if you blur it by like 300 or something like that, and then just take the mix really, really low. So if we gain up and see what that's actually doing, if I disable it, we see an image like this, and if I enable it, you see an image like this. And you put the mix very low, and you really don't want to overdo this because it'll be kind of annoying to look at, and sometimes compositors can push things too far. But if you notice what happens, it sort of mushes all the blacks together. And this just makes everything kind of feel like it sits. And so that's a really good technique. So you can increase the size of the blur. So maybe we'll put it at 700 or something like that. And just put the blur, put the mix very, very low. So we can, you can play around with the size and see whatever looks appealing. But yeah, it just kind of helps everything sit together a little bit. And so that's one thing you can do, is diffusion. Sometimes you don't want to put diffusion over the whole image. Sometimes you just want to kind of maybe add a little bit of diffusion on our foreground character. So one way you can do that, I'm not going to do that in this case because it actually does help to diffuse the whole shot with a little blur. So I'll just label that as diffusion. But I just want to show you guys the other way as well. So if you're working on other shots, sometimes you don't want to diffuse the entire thing. You just want to get something that's a little bit too perfect in the foreground to sort of absorb the background colors a little bit. So one way to do that is to take the background input. So this little pipe is going into the background, and I'm just going to blur it. So I'll put a blur node by hitting B and kind of blur it sort of like crazy like before. But what we want to do now is take the foreground and we stencil it from that blur. Sorry, we want to, stencil it. And actually, we can do it the other way around here. So just stencil the foreground from the background, and then we'll blur that inwards. So that's actually what I meant to do. So stencil, foreground from background, blur. So we can blur it like, I don't know the exact amount, you play with it or whatever. Also, sometimes you got to be careful as we see there's some stuff coming in from the bottom of the frame, which might just be some pixel data that's out here. So sometimes you want to crop, put a crop node just so that there's no extra pixels around the frame of the background. So if I blur that now, you see with the crop, it doesn't bring in stuff from beyond the frame. And so we're basically just blurring this into our character. But then what we can do is take a mask. So we take the foreground, mask the image, so mask, and we get an image like this. So it's sort of like a light wrap, but the difference between a light wrap is usually just around the very edges. So if I reduce the blur, a light wrap, it looks something like this. And this is one way to actually create a light wrap. So you could totally, you could create a light wrap using similar techniques. But diffusion is kind of different. So if I kind of increase this a lot, this is kind of what a diffusion is doing. So if we take that image and we merge it over, merge it as a plus, and then make sure the output is set to only RGB. We don't want to mess up the alpha here. We're just affecting the colors. So if we look at the image, we're getting something like this. And this is way too much, but just to demonstrate, we'll look at the background and just see. So if we look at the background here, so obviously way too much. But what you do is you take this plus now and you mix it way down. So you can either mix it down or you can put a grade beforehand and just really grade it down to a very low level. So if I gain up while I'm looking at the shot, we can mix that in and see if maybe that will help out integration wise. And in this case, like I said, it's not doing the best because we're kind of getting some of these brighter areas on the shoulder, which kind of makes this feel disconnected. But that is a technique that will help you in the future if you are feeling like the background and the foreground, they're not sitting quite together, even after you've adjusted your blacks and stuff like that. Sometimes absorbing a little bit of the background color can help with that. Now, I'm going to talk about one more thing, which is light wrap. So there's something there's two ways to do light wrap, and sometimes you can use the light wrap node, and you'll see people on YouTube and everything taking the light wrap and just kind of placing it over, and you can do something like this, and you can increase the intensity, and sometimes that will help your character sit in, and that's way too much. But usually I'll teach you two ways to do it real quickly, and then I'll show you why one way makes more sense in some cases. So we'll do it the obvious way first, which is the light wrap. And so what usually with the light wrap, you want to do two of them because they're kind of a linear fall off where, you kind of want that quadratic fall off. So if we just do a little bit of intensity, we can kind of have like a stronger one on the edge. And then what you can do is sort of have another one that's like really diffused. So we take the second one and we diffuse it like really far, and then we just lower the intensity a lot. So you have like one that's kind of going far away and then one that's kind of really on the edge. So I can even decrease the intensity a bit of the one on the edge and maybe decrease the size. And so, that sometimes will help your plates sit together. Here we still have a little bit of an alpha problem where our edge is a little bit semi-transparent and we're seeing through the head. So again, that's a QC thing that we would need to fix. But you can see that the light wrap in this case, it actually helps. That's something I would want to have in this shot. If I just scrub through some of the other frames, we can just take a look here. And let's just see, so that's kind of creating a glow. But the problem with this method is, sometimes this will work if you already have kind of a glowy background, but we haven't added any glow to our background. So essentially the problem with this is, let me find a frame where we can demonstrate the problem very clearly. So if I look for a frame like this, I'm going to go, all right, so this is a good frame. So if I enable this, this is where the problem with light wrap comes in. And if this is being used incorrectly, you're going to comp, it's really not the correct thing to happen here photographically. So if you're looking at this light back here is creating a glow over our character, but it's not creating a glow over the background, and the glow is happening in the lens. So it doesn't make sense that this thing would happen here, but it wouldn't continue around like this. For example, if I were to place a radial and, go in here just to show you what it should look like, kind of, is do like a little shape here. You could place a radial, and then you could kind of, gamma up in this area. Maybe not gamma, we could do a little bit of a lift. So if this is happening over the character, it should be happening all the way around like this. So in this case, the light wrap is not doing a good job. And this is the problem with light wrap. And so sometimes you can use this, if, for example, maybe a character is over a sky or something like that, where there's kind of already a glow kind of baked into it. But I wouldn't recommend using this right off the bat. What I would recommend is, if you're dealing with a CG background that doesn't have glow, or you're trying to add glow to an entire image, like we've adjusted the highlights quite a lot in the background here. So in this case, we want to add a little bit of glow to this. So I'm not going to do the light wrap method. So I'm going to delete these, but it's just to demonstrate that potentially the light wrap might work. But if you see areas like I just demonstrated where it's, you know, on the character but not on the background, watch out, because that's not what you want. And we're going to fix this edge and everything after in the last lessons, but I just want to show you guys some new methods here. So we'll continue forward. So we have the diffusion. I'm going to talk about lens flares after, so I'm going to disable this. This is a little lens flare setup I've done. But we're going to talk about how to create a light wrap and also a glow at the same time. So if we don't have light wrap on this character, essentially what I told you is this is just a glow that only appears when we're seeing the really bright thing. So if we key out the highlights like this and we pre-mult it, so we pre-multiply that result and we do an exponential glow, and I'll include this node. If you guys don't have an exponential glow node, I will put it here in the assets so you guys can find that in your script. So we put a little exponential glow on there, and then we what we do is we subtract it from the original so that we're just adding the glow. We don't want to add you know, for example, this is the lights that we already have in the footage. We don't want to re-add those back over the top because they're already there. So we add the glow and then we subtract it from what was already there so that we only are going to add some glow. And then I've screened that over. I've done a screen instead of a plus because if you do a plus, sometimes you can blow out the highlights too much, and they're already quite blown out. So I don't want to push them out further. So sometimes the screen is a little bit softer of an effect. But here is what I'm demonstrating. So here we have a light wrap effect. We have light wrapping over the foreground character, but we're also getting that a little bit of that radio glow around as well. So this is actually a better solution than doing a light wrap. And so that's why, you know, light wrap is not always the best thing to use. And see, we're already getting a light wrap, you know, and it's exponential as well. So that's kind of what would actually happen physically. Now, we would need to go in and, you know, I'm going to go in there and paint this alpha. So just to demonstrate this, I'm just going to go on these couple frames here just to show. I'm going to merge this over my alpha and just do a little quick paint just so we can see like what this kind of looks like properly, because I think this edge is a little bit distracting because it's kind of changing the effect and how it looks. So if I just go there and I'm kind of merging a little shape over the alpha. So let's go to the actual alpha and just take a look. So if I gamma down, we should be able to see. Yeah, so this is where the problem is happening. We see that if I gamma down our alpha, see that our alpha is not quite solid there. So we could kind of grade that up. So maybe we'll just do a little grade here and use a roto paint to kind of just bring the white point. So let me just go here with a paint and kind of close some stuff here so it goes a little bit faster. Make sure I'm looking at it. And we'll just bring the white point up and see. Let's just see if this is working here. I want to try this. I'm just going to switch it to a roto shape and I'll set this to, I'm not sure why this is not working. Oh, we need to be in 4K because this is before our reformat. This is before our reposition and rescale. So again, we need these little reformats before that point. So there we go. Now it's working. And so I'm just going to very slightly go in there and very slightly push down the white point on the area. So if I go back to the original, you see it barely makes a difference on this frame. But if we gamma way down, we can see it's making a big difference on those very low values. And that matters when we're doing light wraps. So I'm just going to go in there and with a roto shape and just kind of add that. So you can see our alpha we're keeping the soft edge. It's not doing much. But if we look at our light wrap, this is where those kind of problems will start to appear if you don't have a clean alpha. So here it's starting to clean it up a little bit. So if I reduce that white point even more, you can see that edge is a little bit cleaned up. So let me just disable and enable to show you guys. So if I disable, You can see we're getting that semi-transparent edge on a really bright area. If I enable, it's fixing that problem. And it's really not changing our edge much, so that's good. So I need to go through and basically QC that, basically roto this little fix wherever those kind of problems are appearing. Now, if his edge in the alpha is a little bit semi-transparent, but it's dark behind, it might not even matter because, we're not seeing any of that. We're only seeing it on the really bright areas where it's kind of breaking because we need a really solid alpha. When the image is over 1, this is when this can happen. So again, I'm not going to worry about edges if you can't see the problem. I'm only going to worry about the problem if it's coming through in the final shot. And, I don't know if this is happening down here as well. It looks like it might be a little bit coming through. So if I just tweak that, just see if that's, that might not be a mistake. It might be okay actually, but I'm just double checking. So yeah, this is kind of an area that, we could use a little bit of diffusion. So if I actually fix that alpha, you see like we're getting a kind of a really dark edge against like the background. So this is where we would want to have some kind of diffusion so that you just don't draw your eye to that. This kind of light wrap is looking pretty good though up here. So let's just keep going. Yeah, so those are a couple little tweaks that we've made that help, and that's one way to do a better light wrap. And I'm going to go through and just kind of roto those little areas now, and we'll talk more about just trying to fix some of these conflicts of value after in the next lesson. So I'm going to just go through and put this little white point adjustment on these problem areas.